Hi, Maria. Welcome to our webinar today.
Hi, Amir. It's great to be here.
Really looking forward to discussing the details of how we are transforming the networking industry and what your view is regarding that, and also how it will impact the AI era. So let's get started. Myself, I'm Amir Khan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Alkira Inc. And I started the company in 2018. With the premise that we are going to completely change the networking landscape by building network infrastructure as a service, which is very agile, scalable, integrates security, and uh, available on demand globally. So many customers since then have adopted our solution. My background is that I started in the late 80s in the networking industry and joined Cisco in 1991, stayed there for at least a decade, and then went to a few startups as well as large companies like Juniper, Bay Networks, Nortel, and have built a couple of companies on my own. I'm here with Maria Martinez, ex-Chief Operating Officer of Cisco Systems. Maria has really had an illustrious career that all of us dream of. She started in the 80s, worked at AT&T Bell Labs, and she was a department head there, joined Motorola after that, went to Microsoft, became a corporate VP for Microsoft Services. From there, she went on to Salesforce. She was the president of Global Customer Success, as well as Salesforce Latin America. Then, most recently, she was at Cisco as a chief operating officer. She's also on the board of many companies, including some household companies like Bank of America, McKesson, Tyson Foods, and some really interesting startups like Fiddler AI. So, Maria, it's an honor to be with you today discussing how we are going to change the networking industry. So, any opening thoughts from you?
Well, first, thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited about what you're doing. I'm very passionate about networking. Started my career with networking, and kind of, you would say, wrapped up my real full time career in networking as well. And you're really changing how networking is done. So I'm really excited to be here with you today.
So, tell us a little bit about your journey with networking, especially at Cisco. I mean, building hardware, building software platform, or helping build the software platforms also. And you've seen it all pretty much from networking perspective. So what's your view is what was stopping the networking industry from going to the next level to be able to support the new requirements of uh, applications for AI or applications that require the agility in today's world, and the applications that want to move at the speed of the business rather than become networking becomes kind of a hindrance from that perspective.
So, I mean, networking has evolved tremendously since I started my career. I mean, when I started at Bell Labs, we were building, some of the most advanced switches. And, in those days, our switches were replacing manual operators. So, I mean, it was
Yeah.
like really a long time ago. And of course, then, we built the cellular systems that, all the switching infrastructure for that. Of course, that was a massive change, and all the work that, have done, in modern networking for the internet and Cisco and all that. And, all along, networking has been complex. You've needed a lot of really, smart people, highly trained, very, certified. It's just hard work. It just, kind of up there with rocket science, right? And I think that, right now, I think one of the real exciting things about what you're doing is how you're making it really simple. How can you really deploy networking at speed with simplicity, high security and all those things in pretty complex environments, right? Where you are
Yeah.
not only doing the traditional enterprise, networking, but you're also connecting, with, hyperscalers and all the real sophisticated networking that is done today very quickly and very easily. But with all of that, now we're not done, right? Because AI comes along and makes things a lot more complex with massive volumes of data and even much more, all the data centers that are being built, and all that. So now we're entering this new wave of networking. I believe that will be a new opportunity for us in this space.
That's wonderful. I mean, again, we've seen the networks go from almost no connectivity to point-to-point connectivity and multi-point. And then we built the routers, and the evolution took place over many, many years. And we built the many complex environments across the globe, right, as part of Cisco, as part of many other companies. It's fascinating to see where we are today. And what a lot of people don't realize is that networking is the underlying roads and railroads and airplanes, right, which carry the traffic across the globe. And without that, there would be no applications running. So what Cisco and others did to allow building and interconnecting everything across the globe, it's just amazing, right? How things came together over time. And like anything, things evolve over time, and we had to come up with a solution which meets the requirements of the newer applications, which, want to move at the speed of business and want simplicity, want agility, want the security at extreme levels, and want the scale at the extreme levels. So really appreciate you, talking a little bit about Alkira and the simplicity of our solution and the scale at which we have deployed. So tell us, I mean, you have you're on the board of multiple public companies and also startups. What are you seeing from the AI perspective? Where is it going? What's your view on how the applications are evolving? Are we, as some people are saying, in kind of a bubble, or are we moving from, is it all real and it's going to pan out nicely over the next many years? And what's your view on that? I mean, we
Yeah.
talk about this often, so really I would like to see what you think.
Well, I mean, this is a pretty broad topic. We can be talking about it for a long,
I
long.
know.
Everybody's talking about it. Certainly, you can't imagine that it
Yeah.
is the hot topic in the boardroom.
Yeah.
Everybody's is concerned. Are we moving fast enough? What do we need to do there? I think definitely AI is the biggest technology. I would say disruption that it's happening certainly in my lifetime, and the technology, as we all know, it's very revolutionary. But I think that the thing that amazes me the most is that the adoption curve is just much faster than anything we've ever seen, right? ChatGPT had 100 million users in just 2 months. Well, if you look at other technologies like the browser or the iPhone or things like that, it really took them years, to get to
Mhm.
that level of adoption. So you have that massive adoption. I haven't found anybody that I talk to. I know I probably don't talk to all kinds of people everywhere, but everyone is using it today. And everybody's talking about the use cases, right? That they're deploying. And so they would say at the consumer level, it's just really highly adopted. But I don't think yet at the enterprise is to the same level. But what it does is that just the customers of the enterprise have high expectations right now, right? Because we're all using it. So if we're using it for our own personal work and our personal efficiency, we are going to start expecting more and more that enterprises do that. And I think every enterprise is certainly deploying it, but I don't see yet all the enterprises getting the value for it. It's just a lot of potential, right? So you now start talking about, okay, how can you drive, faster adoption? What are and that's what we're spending a lot of time, in the boardroom to talk about, okay, how do we make that transition and how do we make it work for the enterprise?
Right, right, right. And your view, I mean, for years, the enterprises treated the network as a static infrastructure, right? And uh, from your perspective, why does the AI model break that, right? In the cloud era, and we are starting to see how some of the applications are getting spread across multiple different environments, etc. But it would be really interesting to get your view on why, the deployment, manageability, and troubleshooting of this new for these new environments, right, it becomes a very big challenge. When we saw cloud go from, deploying hardware, software to completely as a service as far as compute is concerned or storage is concerned. But we never saw that evolution in the networking industry. And when we started Alkira, people were still deploying networks in a piecemeal approach, right? They would deploy the hardware or virtual instances across different environments and stitch them together through manual mechanisms or through nice orchestration or network manageability tools. But there was no complete overhaul of the system per se to be able to meet the requirements of the AI era. So from your perspective, is that, I mean, does it, are we still in the rest of the industry a little back, to when things were done manually, or has the broader industry made any progress other than the solution that you see from Alkira?
Well, I think what you're doing is pretty revolutionary. And as you know, we have, I know CIOs that are deploying to your technology, right? And they truly are impressed by what you're doing. You kind of hinted at this a little bit earlier,
Mhm.
unfortunately, networking tends to be an afterthought in general, right?
Mhm.
Even now, if you think about AI, everybody's talking about GPUs and data centers. And when they think computing power, more
Mhm.
they think applications. They think all those things, and then they think networking. Of course, some of us that are more in the operations world, we know the importance of networking, and I push for that. But I think if you look at the more advanced companies, I see they are the ones that are taking this visionary approach to really redesign their networks and think about this in a much more broader way. Just thinking about not these flat networks anymore, but hey, no matter, you can't control these anymore, right? It's just, if it was getting complicated before, now it's going to get more and more complicated. So you need a much modern architecture. You need products like the one you're doing to be able to move fast, or otherwise you're not going to be able to keep up, right? One of the things that I, truly think it's quite interesting. We talked a little bit about the adoption curve right here with AI, right, which is changing everything. But I think what I actually think changes the most is the improvement curve, right? The rate at which things are changing, it's just unprecedented. I don't think we've ever talked about that, right? Because you know, you put out, a browser or a technology, and 6 months later something else comes, and that's just not the way it's here. It's every week there's a new announcement. There are new models, new, you know, applications, MCP servers, all these kinds of things that every week are happening. So what that's driving is actually more and more complexity faster, and the need for these kinds of better architecture, better architected and much more agile kind of implementations. It's now becoming kind of like, a must have in order for companies to be able to leverage these technologies.
So that's a very interesting observation and recommendation. One of the things you have emphasized throughout your career is building organizations around customer outcomes rather than technology. So how does that principle apply to the infrastructure decisions in the boardrooms or in the meetings with the CIOs or CISOs today? And how do they align around that in your view? And what has changed, right? The infrastructure decisions now affect basically revenue velocity, right? So what's your view on that?
Well, I touched on that a little bit earlier with, customer outcomes, being the customer expectations, right? Being a lot higher. If they were higher before, now they are even higher. So I think what that translates a lot is it's for I would say at the boardroom, spending a lot of time talking about what are the kind of people that companies are going to need to be able to drive this transformation, to drive this focus on the customer. So I think it forces companies to rethink how they need to be structured to be able to serve customers in the future. Because right now, so I think there's a lot of discussion around talent, and a lot about how, what kind of people are the ones that are really going to be able to guide us to get there. How do I evolve my talent, right? to be able to take advantage of these newer technologies and these newer products, because now they know they have no choice but to go there. Well, before you'd spend a lot of time thinking, okay, I need to invest $100 million to do that in a board meeting. Now it's not like if, now is no, we have to, and how we're going to do it. And I see actually a little bit less of a conversation around money, because almost every company says we just got to do it. I don't know where we're going to get it from. I think people also think that they will also result in cost savings, right? So then the conversation moves more to what kind of structure and talent am I going to need to be able to leverage these capabilities.
And in your view, majority of the customers will move from this hardware-centric approach to infrastructure consumed as a service, just like all other areas like compute and storage. I think that's what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I think that's already happening. I
Happening,
think
yeah.
networking it's not as fast as it moved, but for computing it's happening, right? Which in a way
Mhm.
then networking has to follow. So I do think that is already happening, and I think it will get accelerated. I think that's the opportunity that you have, right? Because again, not necessarily that people think about it that way, but it just naturally evolves that way.
Yeah. And Maria, from your perspective, a lot of people are focused on the data centers for AI, right? So these LLMs, they're, getting trained within the confines of the data centers, but the inference can take place outside of that, right? So a lot of people are struggling with how the network aids in the evolution of AI outside of the data center. What kind of impact will it have? So, in your view, what is your view on that? That are we going to see an end-to-end overhaul of the network, or the primary focus in the near future is going to be on the data center?
No, I do think that I think it's going to be in the network, because I
Mhm.
do think that a lot of the large corporations are reducing their data centers, are not increasing them. Okay, so they are going to continue to rely on outsourcers to do that. So then what comes back to them is it's not going to be one of them. It's going to be multiple ones. In a way, it's kind of what you already saw with hyperscalers, that is
Mhm.
just now starting to compound, right? Because I do see even these large companies that I work with, large and small companies, right? But even the large companies, I just don't see any more of a big appetite for them to
Mhm.
build big data centers, because that's just a very, very sophisticated expertise, right? That you're going to outsource mostly. So then it
Mhm.
comes back, okay, so how do I connect all these things? Actually, before connectivity, they go to data, right? It's kind of like data becoming a much more strategic asset versus, an IT problem. I see that's probably one of them. And then I would say probably second is, how am I going to connect all these things?
Mhm. Great. So we've been talking about the network infrastructure itself and how it aids the deployment of AI applications and how it impacts those environments. Now, let's shift the focus a little bit to the AI, applicability to the network operations or manageability or, deployment and configuration. At least at Alkira, we've had the experience recently that our team has become much more productive utilizing the AI tools which are available. Are the larger companies looking at it from the same perspective to be able to manage, operate, troubleshoot their networking infrastructure using the AI tools? And how much of an emphasis is there on those types of tools or adopting those tools?
I mean, absolutely. I think that all the companies that I'm working with are moving at light speeds to put the tools in the
Interesting.
hands of all their employees, right? Again, sometimes spending so much money that it is crazy, right? Like they want to enable everybody. They rather have people using the tools that they're providing, because otherwise they're going to use them, on their phones, right? And so they everybody's moving towards that. Everybody's expecting, more and more of that. Uh, Again, how fast and how effective they can be, I think you see differences there. But I think the kinds of things, expectations, are like, of course, everything it's got to be prompt based. I mean, I think you guys are kind of moving that direction too, right? Everything's got to be a prompt and no more dashboards. Everybody's building agents. So how are you going to manage agents and how you're going to connect all these agents? And so I think that's where the conversation now goes. I see massive movement towards adoption for efficiency, effectiveness of employees and everybody building agents. I think now what's emerging now is it's a more of an urgent need. Okay, how am I going to put all of this together?
And also changing a little bit towards the leadership, you've had helped lead many transformations inside some of the world's most complex technology companies. And what leadership lessons do you think apply when enterprises modernize their infrastructure, or primarily the networking infrastructure? What's your take on that?
I think probably the biggest issue to be able to take advantage of all these technologies in front of us. It's just really how you're going to drive that transformation, how you're going to look at the people. It's a very, I've had the opportunity to talk with a lot of, heads of HR and, of course, chief transformation officers and all these kinds of people that are struggling with this. My take on this is that this is the one area where I don't think things change much. I think you're still going to have to drive transformation, in a way, I would say the old way, but transformation is always hard. Most of them truly fail. So I think that leaders need to figure out, again, you can put tools in the hands of everybody to drive efficiency. I'm not worried about that. That's going to continue to evolve. But the question is, are you really going to drive significant transformation for your company, right? What are these big bets that you're really going to restructure something? You're going to change your business model. You're going to change your operating model. It's going to require that you redesign things. This is just not about tweaking anymore, right? I'm talking about the two, in a way, I call it the two different AIs. One is the organic one, which I think will move a lot faster. And the other one is, okay, how are companies really going to be able to leverage, to create a disruption, right? So the classical things, you need to figure out what is your burning platform for your team, right? How you're going to get, the people motivated. What are going to be your new metrics for success? What kind of incentive structures are you going to put in place? These are the same things that we always have to do for a transformation independent from AI, but they need to be done. And I see companies still struggling with making that, what are the big bets that I'm really going to do for my company? What is I'm going to really drive that disruption? And it's going to be what some of the bigger opportunities are going to be.
So essentially, it's going to be key to align the technology with business outcomes, right? As always.
Yeah.
And breaking down the IT silos, and hopefully the technology, the newer types of technologies help us with that, right? Because companies have struggled with that over time, and go ahead.
If I can say something about that point that you made.
Yeah, please.
In a way, it's like you should worry about the business outcomes. You shouldn't worry about the technology, because you have to assume that now things can be built, right?
Yeah.
So I think this changes the whole paradigm for executives to have these discussions about build versus buy.
Right.
Completely puts it upside down, because build is so easy. Before, build was hard, right?
Yes.
But build is so easy now that, in a way, it's harder to think about what is the business problem, what is the business value, how are you going to bring new significant value to your customer, and having that idea and being convicted about it. It's going to be a lot easier to implement than ever before, right? I mean, that's why I think some of the SaaS companies are struggling today, at least, not necessarily that I agree with it, but it's just because people think it's going to be a lot easier to build things. Now, that's not going to be the case for everything, but I do think it's going to be the case for a lot of things, where you can be a little bit more, a different way to think about what am I going to build versus what I'm going to buy, right? And when I really want to have customer differentiation and real customer uniqueness, and outcomes that I want to drive to differentiate my company from another one, whatever that is, make the big bet because you're going to be able to build it a lot easier than you ever could
Hmm.
before.
So essentially, the easier or simpler applications can be built very easily in-house now versus the complicated infrastructure stuff, which continues to require a lot of knowledge and involvement from many different people who've had experience over many, many years, because there are so many different areas of learning, right? Not only what's available in the books, but what's not available in the books, right? So how do you integrate everything together? But certainly the productivity is going to be increased over time in all areas, right? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah. So, and what do we do about investing in the talent? I mean, I know a lot of things can be learned online automatically by the workforce, but do you think there's still a need for structured education of the employee base in large as well as small companies, or are we going to see a different paradigm there?
No, absolutely. I do think that companies are going to have to invest a lot
Mhm.
on retraining their people and thinking about how I'm going to redesign my structure, my roles, right? Like
Mhm.
a role that you may need before that you had thousands of them, you may only need a few, you may need none, and you're going to need new roles. I mean, everybody's talking about, prompt engineers, role, agent managers and all these new roles that are being discussed right now are gonna companies are gonna have to be very thoughtful about it. They're gonna have to be. I'm
Mhm.
going to one
Yeah.
company, one of
Yeah.
my large companies that it is doing massive investment in training. Every single person, 100,000 plus people being trained in AI, right? And what does that mean? And put it more to make sure everybody learns and everybody can start thinking that way. And you talked about how you drive transformation. At the end of the day, some people are going
Mhm.
to everybody at least should be knowledgeable, but you still are going to
Mhm.
need to drive transformation to be selective and choose those 10, 20, 30 people in the company that are truly going to embrace it and be the role models, right, for the rest to be
Mhm.
able to do that. But I think investing, everybody needs to be aware of this and remove the fear a little bit from people, right? You know,
Mhm.
and think about it more from an evolution rather than everybody's gonna get you know put out. Like think about this role, I gotta you know evolve it into that role, right? So I'd say that if I was a CEO right now, I would be spending a lot of time thinking about this to be able to bring the company along, with me into the future.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and we also talk to a lot of CIOs and CISOs, when we meet the customers. Um, and we normally ask them, what are the key actions that you're taking today and also in the next 12 to 18 months to continue to evolve and adopt the AI applications from the infrastructure perspective. And they all talk about, how um, they want to, I mean, as much as cloud infrastructure is very important, some of them are looking at bringing some of the controls back into their data centers and into their own environment. Do you see that hybrid environment as a key play for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah, yeah. I do see that. I do see. Yeah, I absolutely see a hybrid, more, hybrid, not less, right? Because more
Yeah.
things are getting introduced. And how do you do that? I think that more than ever for CIOs, it's important to be working really closely with the business
Hmm.
because things are moving so fast that, you know, I think that the CIOs need to, I mean, that's why your platform is great, right? Because you have the agility, but no longer thinking that these issues are only the CIO is probably what
Hmm.
I worry about the most, right? Is for the
Right, right.
CIOs to make sure they have the platforms to provide the agility, the simplicity, and the speed, and then
Hmm.
to have the business more engaged than ever to
Hmm.
guide that and to make sure that you can deliver the business
Yeah.
outcome that company need, right?
And what do you think is the importance of integrating or embedding security into the network fabric going forward? Because historically, what we have seen is pretty much static deployment of firewalls and other security devices in the network fabric, right? And steering traffic, or rather, they were mostly deployed inline because of the lack of capability to automatically address the needs of the applications, right? You didn't need to always send all the traffic through firewalls. So what we ended up doing was, majority of the time, we overbuilt the infrastructure and made sure that we had the networking, the security resources available, or other types of networking resources available for peak utilization, right? And that was a major expense in the enterprise IT infrastructure. Now, as we move forward, right, with the level of automation that we are doing in the networking fabric, it seems like security can be deployed in much more interesting ways, right? Where you can selectively steer the traffic, or sections, from where you want to steer the traffic towards these security devices. And security also applies at different levels, right? At the network layer or at the application layer. And you're starting to see a lot of AI security, application level security popping up. And what do you see? Is it really, really important to have that centralization so that you have better control of over your security overall, so that you can deploy the security in a way that you have 100% assurity that the interesting traffic that you want to steer towards the security devices gets done through generic policy mechanisms? Or are people going to still rely on the static mechanisms of the past to a certain extent?
No, I do think that security becomes the need a lot more security. I mean, not only the perimeter,
Yeah.
it's got to be dynamic. It's got to be, you got to have a master view of the security, right? Across, you have to. So I think that the need for that is becoming more and more. And I think that one thing that is likely going to make this like a non-negotiable thing now in the future is going to be agents, the deployment of agents, right? Because everybody thought about users and perimetry and things like, but now these agents are going to be everywhere, so I do think that I may be wrong, but I think that is going to trigger the need to not think about it much more in the traditional way. That, and the fact that it just things are a lot more dynamic and fluid now. Yeah.
Right, 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 right. Yeah. So let's go, look at, I mean, we talked about 12 to 18 months. Let's think about, a little bit further out. Um, what will the enterprise networks look like if we get through this transformation and if the technology continues to evolve? Are you starting to envision that the infrastructure will change, with where things become completely autonomous from the networking perspective? Or, it'll still be consumed in a very careful manner? Do we want to trust the autonomy capabilities of some of these newer tools which are coming up, and their impact on security? And so what's your perspective on that? Because of this, a lot of people are starting to think about what happens as the AI evolves.
Yeah, I do think we need to worry about that autonomous world. I think that because AI, I say AI, it's going to move at in two speeds in enterprise. I like to think about it that way. There's going to be the experimentation that you can do with certain things that you can afford, especially with internal productivity. I can experiment with things, right? I can try. And in that world, things are just going to go pretty wild, I think. And then I think there'll be the things that companies need to be a lot more thoughtful about, finances and customer visible things. And those, I think companies will be a lot more careful about that. And it will move slower, right? Because you want to be careful. You want to have the right governance, and you do need a governance. I think governance and observability are two areas that are going to require a lot more evolution now here with AI. I'm very thoughtful, and I encourage companies to think through that from the beginning. But I do think you're going to allow experimentation, and for that,
Right.
all these things are going to have places for them. We're going to have to protect against those, right?
Yeah. And when we talk to the leaders at different companies, the view is always like, we need to have a certain level of predictability in our network infrastructure, right? So we don't want autonomous systems to make changes which we don't know what happened and how do we troubleshoot in case something goes wrong and stuff like that. And I totally agree with you. At some point, the technology will evolve enough that we will let it make more of the decisions, but how far are we from that? Let it control our destiny from the network infrastructure perspective or overall IT infrastructure perspective, right? And I think for the foreseeable future, I totally agree with you. I mean, it's going to be you know, it's the humans are involved in the decision criteria, and there needs to be certain predictability in all aspects of IT where it's very, very complicated. Now, simpler tasks we will automate, like observability or making recommendations, and we will start from there. Then we move into how much of a control do we give to these autonomous systems and slowly let them evolve over time. And then time will tell how much of automation we're happy with, right? So no, I really appreciate your, views on where the market is going, and we really appreciate you joining our advisory board and giving us advice on a regular basis. What an honor to be with you today, discussing these topics. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us, and really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Amir, for having me here. The honor is really mine. You built a great team and a great
Thank
product.
you.
I'm glad to be hearing all your successes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You're always very kind.